Uganda was independent. In October 2022, the country will mark its 60th anniversary, the Diamond Jubilee. Your public broadcaster will look back in time and mine the diamond in the Diamond Jubilee, giving the nation reasons to reflect and celebrate. On your favorite weekly program, Behind the Headlines, we'll shine light on the infrastructure, industrialization, ICT, agriculture, tourism, and health as part of our national story. Be part. Join the discussion every Wednesday at 10 p.m. on UBC, Inspiring Uganda.
A warm welcome this Wednesday, the 21st of September 2022. My name is Charles Odongtho, and today we are going to be taking a look at the economy, its performance. How good is it doing? Are you feeling it? Are you not feeling it? We are going to be having that discussion. But we are discussing the economy and its performance in respect of 60 years. We will be having comparisons here and there. Uganda in the next 2-3 weeks. 9th October is when we celebrate our independence, and this year is a special one. Uganda is going to be making 60 years after gaining independence, if you like, self-rule. To discuss whatever we are going to be discussing, the outlook of the economy, we have the PS, Secretary to the Treasury, who is an OB of Behind the Headlines here, and is seated on the hot seat this evening, the not yet honorable.
This one is hot.
Dr. Gobi Ramadan, he is here with us. You're most welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Charles.
By the way, how does the place look these days when you sit there? We since changed the arrangement.
No, this is like the third time I'm here, so it's not.
Is this new one?
It's not a very, on the new one, it's the second.
Okay. Good.
I'm glad to be back.
Good, always good to hear from you. Next to him is the Honorable Paul Omara. He is MP for Otuke County in the Great Lango region. And Honorable Paul Omara sits on the Budget Committee, he sits on the Finance Committee, and he's here with us. And a senior banker, a senior finance man. He has worked with Stanbic Bank, Standard Chartered. He has been bank manager and CEO of the bank, and worked in Malawi, South Africa, Kenya, Uganda. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much.
Big profile, and to discuss these matters.
Thank you, I'm glad to be back.
Good. Next to Honorable Paul Omara is Honorable Mapenduzi Martin Ojara, MP for Bardege Layibi in Gulu City. You're most welcome back, Honorable.
Thank you, Lady Charles, and good evening, viewers.
Good. And finally, we have the lady who, the indefatigable lady, Council Sarah Birete. Someone made a comment the other day and said she's good enough to take on 3 or 4 men on these discussions. You first wait I finish my statement. I didn't say on these discussions. And Sarah Birete is Executive Director of the Center for Constitutional Governance. Sarah, you're most welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Charles, and good evening, viewers.
Good. We will be streaming live on YouTube and on UBC television, Uganda, that's on YouTube. But you can also join the discussion via our hashtag, which is hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. You just have to write hashtag, the whole sentence, UBC Behind the Headlines. That's on Twitter. And then you can also finally send a message through 0709 602592. I will repeat that number for you. If you want to join the discussion by asking a question or making a comment, just simply send to 0709 602592, and we will, the earlier the better, so that we can read your question and incorporate your comments in the discussion that will be going on. Let's start the discussion. I don't know why I keep calling Gobi honorable, but maybe it's because someone said he's the alternative minister for finance. But Mr. Gobi, cries around Uganda, people say we are not feeling the economy. Even MPs that we know are paid well say we are not feeling it. Then public servants, civil servants, teachers, and I don't know how you are complaining, but many of the people with you are saying that there is no money, we haven't been paid 4 months, 5 months. Did you join did you take charge of the treasury at a wrong time, or just that the economy happens to be doing unwell? What is it that is going on? Let's start from that.
Okay, thank you, Charles, and good evening to the panelists once again, and the viewers out there. Number one, it's not true that people are not getting salaries. They are getting their salaries, only that at the beginning of the financial year, with the number of changes in the salaries, especially coming in after the budget had been appropriated, including enhancements of scientists and our officers serving in the military, there were adjustments which had to be made on the salary, on the payroll, and that took some time for officers to get them done. That is officers in public service, in my Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, and then in the cost centers, in the various ministries, agencies and local governments, particularly in local governments, to adjust to pay the new rates. And that work has been ongoing in the past couple of months, and we are finalizing it with this month. Normal programming will be effective October, where every public officer will be able to get their salaries by the 28th of the month. And it's not because of money, that there is not enough money. No, it's because there were changes to be made in the payroll, and it required information, various information, you know, programming a public service of over 350,000 personnel who are also moving every day in terms of the numbers. Some are retiring, others are getting on pension, others are doing. So it took time for that adjustment. But today we had a final meeting where we finalized now those numbers to get the people paid regularly. But the affected people were quite few, especially in the local governments, because the information was scanty on who is a scientist to get. Sometimes they could switch even the wage. You find the arts teacher is now receiving the one of the scientists, and so to make all of those adjustments took some time. But we are now on top of it, and they will be able to get their wages regularly.
Is this happening for the first time? Why are people making it look like when you talk to people, and many even actually sent messages, even when we threw out, you know, information that we are going to host you, and on this topic, many said, please don't, this is unprecedented, and these are senior people. Does it mean this is happening for the first time, the adjustments and all this?
Yeah, you know, the enhancements came after the budget had been appropriated. They are going to be dealt with under supplementary, and they are huge adjustments. You have been around, have you ever seen people enhanced here to this magnitude? You have had the debate as a country, enhancing the scientists and the military generals from the colonel onwards, and it is the first in the history of the country to happen. So, and it came after the budget had moved, so it caused a shock in terms of the people getting the information on who should get what, because it was quite a back and forth movement. And you know, matters of pay, you don't want to pay wrong people public resources, or to deny those who are supposed to get their money also earning it. So it is something which I think shouldn't worry anyone, because in government, even that one who has not been paid to, they always get their money, either in arrears or something. But it had to be that adjustment, and it was the first of its kind, yes.
Okay. You mentioned something which was good, good music to my ears, that it's not because there is not enough money.
Yeah.
So health-wise, economically, from John at URA, is the health good?
Oh yes, for the first 2 months of the year, July and August, URA collected a surplus.
Correct.
Revenue. So we don't have any shortage in revenue so far. And it's also projecting good performance this last month of the quarter of September. So revenue is performing well, and it is coming in from even unexpected quarters, you know, on import duty, on telecos, and of course pay because of the enhancements and so on. So the revenue is performing well. This last month we had a surplus of about 53 billion, over and above.
This is August.
The target, yes.
53 billion August.
Yes.
Wow. Nice to hear. Good work there. Let me come to the Honorable Omara. So can we say that after the shocks caused by COVID, from your projection, from your perspective, that the country shouldn't be worried? What this hullabaloo around the country, complaints, cries, you know, frustration expressions and all that, does that mean that it is only temporary? Why is the information not out there, especially from, even through you MPs, people's representatives? Why can't you inform the teachers? Why can't you sensitize them if there is this kind of information?
Thank you very much, Charles. I just don't know whether the Secretary to the Treasury is being, how do I call it?
Too nice?
Not too nice. Secretive with the truth. Because if you look at the macroeconomic environment in Uganda at the moment, and especially if you look at the element of inflation, we had experienced for almost about 4 months now, a growing and a climbing inflation. And people are feeling this in their pockets. We approved the budget sometime in May, and by now we expected that that budget would be executed upon. But if you look at the releases which was made in Q1, we was totally bastardized, and we were wondering what is happening with our treasury, because we expected development expenditures to be funded. We expected non-wage expenditures to be taken care of. But all ministries are crying all over the country. Today we were in Parliament, and the front line, which is actually executive, was wondering what is happening with the Treasury. And as a Committee of Finance, we summoned the Minister of Finance to come and explain really why were the releases so muted. I think an example was given about Kampala, where money for infrastructure which was given was about 20 billion shillings, which is quite laughable. So the projections that we had made in terms of the GDP growth will not be achieved. And I know that as we had discussed previously here, we said the Bank of Uganda target for inflation was 5%. That the moment inflation goes beyond the 5% limit, Bank of Uganda will then come in using all the relevant monetary instruments to really control inflation. And I think they have taken that. Recently, they increased the CBR by 50 basis points. Now, so CBR is now at 9%. So they are trying to mute the money supply through the banks. But what has happened, instead of the government leaving the central bank to deal with the inflation,
Which economics is that?
they have come using the fiscal policies, the fiscal instruments, to again control money supply. So this is what it means. They have basically refused to spend. So they have refused to spend. And by the way, this is a chicken and egg thing. You can't have your cake and eat it at the same time. If you want growth, then it is a requirement that you must spend, and spend according to the Appropriation Act and according to the cash flow and the budget plan which has been approved. But our friends in the Ministry of Finance, they arrogate for themselves the powers which they don't have, and they withhold back money. They withhold back money. And so the challenge which the country is having now is that we have our friends in the Ministry of Finance who are basically, in the name of fighting inflation, they have refused to spend money. So the Q1 releases were quite muted. What they have basically spent money on...
You better tell the viewer
Yes.
that Q1 means quarter one. First quarter.
Quarter one, the substantial amount of money which I think they spent, which was about, I think, 3.5 trillion, was the treasury money. Treasury means they basically used the money to pay debt. So, and I agree with the finance that debt is our priority, because a moment we default on debt, then our credit ratings will be grossly affected. But the question is, why do you spend money in other areas and don't spend money in the areas that we care so much about? If, for example, we've talked so much about the parish development model, and the secretary, the amount of money which we have budgeted is 1,059 billion. And we expected that during this reign here, we would make that money available to our people so that we can reboot the economy by increasing production. That money has not been forthcoming. And it's something that we have sung about for a very long time. And so if the secretary says the money is not a problem, then what is the problem? And I want to submit to the audience that you can't use both monetary and fiscal instruments to control inflation, which is with the headline inflation right now at 7.9%. We call it it's a one-digit inflationary.
It's 90%. Let me correct you quickly.
Bank of Uganda August report 22nd is what I'm reading. Headline inflation 7.9. I read, so mine is factual. So the question is, why would Bank of Uganda, not Bank of Uganda, the Minister of Finance stampede the country by withholding expenditures on the account of inflation, which is at, given the global financial crisis, we are still far better off at 7.9 headline inflation. We are quite low. And you cannot therefore withhold funds, which is essential for growth. If you use both instruments, it means we are dead in the waters. We are not going to reboot this economy. And if the position escalates with the international crisis happening, with Russia still now going on recruiting people now by force, it means the war in Ukraine will escalate. We'll have problems with grain, we'll have problems with fuel. So which means we would be in trouble if we sit here and don't invest money in our own economy in the names of fighting inflation. Leave that work to Bank of Uganda, the Minister of Finance. That's my suggestion. You can't have your cake and eat it.
I wanted to bring in Sarah and Mapinduzi immediately, but quite some serious punches there. Mr. Gobi, would you want to respond immediately? Then I bring, just for 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Especially to the grave accusations that you are.
And it should give you figures on these Q1 releases, whether
Thank
it was
you.
in consonance with the budget plan.
Yeah,
And
that
the
there are
cash flow plan,
complaints,
yes.
complaints, parish development model, money not released, local governments are complaining, and these are the guys who are really in touch with ensuring that there is development, government activities, you know, all cannot go, most of them cannot go on because there is no, even UNRWA was complaining, you released so little money they cannot pay people who have done work, and a lot of, you know, the infrastructure development all stalled. What is the truth? And that you have taken over the role of Bank of Uganda instead of letting them do the monetary work. You are now the one doing it instead of doing your fiscal duty.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, matters economics should always be discussed with the facts and the knowledge of economics. Number one, the fact is there is inflation in Uganda, like everywhere else in the world. And the current headline inflation for August 2022 is 9%. The honorable member who is representing his people is insisting on a 7.9%, which is a July figure. So inflation increased to 9%, and our target inflation in Uganda is 5%.
Correct.
So we have gone beyond by 4 now.
By 4 percentage points. And the outlook, what the projection is, inflation is likely to continue rising until it peaks, possibly at the end of this calendar year, at upwards of 12%.
Did you say discuss with knowledge?
Yes. So
Okay. You
I
have
would
the
want
monopoly of
to,
knowledge.
please, Honorable.
Let him first submit, and then if need be, we shall.
Revert.
Please, Honorable Mara,
No, please proceed.
I'm saying the inflation of Uganda is 9% of August, and our projection is that we need to tame this inflation. And anyone who's watching and has ever sat in a class of economics knows that of all economic problems which can affect a country, inflation is the most critical challenge. If I always use the analogy of diseases, we have so many diseases in the country. One of them could be the inflation now. Inflation is synonymous with the cancer, call it cancer. We also have low growth of GDP. It's a disease. It's malaria. You have issues of high interest rates. Like now, Bank of Uganda has increased interest rates.
That could be typhoid.
Many people are not happy with the high interest rates because they are going to get money expensively. Call that typhoid.
Or ulcers.
We have also low levels of job creation. It's a disease. Call that flu. Now, if you were Charles, the person who's going to choose between those diseases to suffer from,
About corruption.
which one would you? Okay, there is also corruption. It's a disease.
Which disease is
COVID.
corruption?
Call it COVID. Now somebody is saying choose between
The variant of
diseases.
COVID?
So I don't think anyone rational would say, for me, let me go with the cancer. However challenging it is, let me persevere with it. Cancer is dangerous. Cancer, when they discover it in the human body, they will even pump blood out of the body. You don't say that these doctors are really irrational. How can you take out blood of my relative? They are actually trying to help them to survive. So whenever an economy gets inflation, the first call to every policymaker who's sober is to ensure that we deal with that inflation first and foremost before we deal with any other aspect. So when inflation increased and there is what we call a policy coordination in economics between the central bank and the treasury. Any country which fails to coordinate policy when they are managing the economy, managing the macroeconomy, that country cannot succeed in stabilizing the economy. Uganda's history is a history of managing policy coordination. And today, if Honorable Mara was around in the early 90s, we faced almost a similar challenge in the 90s, where inflation was rising and everybody was concerned. And when a question was asked, what's going on? Someone said, what's going on is fiscal indiscipline. Is for us continuing spending money at a time when we shouldn't. And that person was by the name Emmanuel Tumusime Mutebire, and he instituted a similar medicine to get out inflation. It's painful, of course. It's painful, but it had to be taken. Now, through this quarter one, we cut the budget release. We were supposed to release about 8 trillion. We have released something like now 6 trillion. There are some additions that we made along the way, but at first we released much lower than that. Why? Because we wanted to make the work of the central bank a little bit easier in getting the money supply reduced. The reason why Bank of Uganda increases the interest rate, it's not a formality that they want interest rates to rise. They want to reduce money from circulating. And now, Mr. Omara, the honorable member, wants the government to be counterproductive to the effort of the central bank by being the one to pour more money where they are trying to remove it. It's like somebody cleaning this room and your job is to bring more rubbish and pour it there, and you are saying you are now helping the situation. So I would want Ugandans to understand that this was a very reasonable undertaking to help the economy reduce the pace at which inflation rises. If we didn't do that, perhaps now the inflation would be in double digits, and it would have been perhaps more difficult than it is now. But don't forget, that is not the first time we are having arguments on the economy. A few months ago, we had an argument here when the inflation had just started. And some people, including members of parliament, they were telling us to cut taxes. They were telling us to give subsidies so that we can tame the cost of living. We insisted that that's wrong economics, bad economics. And they were citing our neighbors who were doing the same, or such things they wanted us to do. We insisted that, please, this is not a beauty contest. It's about doing the right thing. Today, no one is raising the same issue because they have realized that actually those who did what they wanted us to do have since realized that we were right and they were wrong, and they are coming back to the very trend that we took. So I would want Ugandans to know that we are the right people, we are doing the right thing, and the Honorable Mara's suggestions, they are offside.
Charles,
thank you.
Charles, can I get
I,
back?
what I just wanted, I'm going to come to the two. I don't want them to miss their points, and then I'll come back to you, Honorable Mara. Just before I take leave of Mr. Gobi, is there a link with what the interventions you have made with what, because that has not been clarified yet. Your minister came to Parliament and made headlines and said Uganda is broke, government is broke.
You will invite my minister and he tells you what you want from him. Please get me right on what I'm telling you.
So there
no
is no
link
link
whatsoever.
Okay.
A country, by the way, let me say this. A country, a state
can never be broke.
Can't get it broke, my
Good.
dear. How?
Some minister once said the same, and I was wondering. Just let me come down to this side of the discussion. Sarah,
To the non-economists, the economists.
how are you feeling? I need to start from you, and then I go to, because I'm sure Honorable Mapenduzi is itching.
No, Charles, for Sarah, she could be broke, but not Uganda.
Not Uganda. Sarah, take it from that. If you're broke, that's your problem, not Uganda.
We are broke.
Sarah and I.
Even PSS is broke.
Oh yeah, you can be broke.
No, that's something. We are broke, but looking at the overview of the economy, whereas there was growth after COVID of 3.3% growing, it continued growing after the opening up of the economy. The cost of living is too high. If you look at the cost of living, and I'm sure every citizen out there really is feeling the pinch. I don't know at what percentage it has risen, but you find that the money we use to survive on no longer makes sense. If you used to work with and maybe I should not mention an amount because people earn in a different range, but whatever money I would find myself using in a month, it now takes me for 2 weeks. So you have a shortfall, and I think that's a 50% increase in the best cost of living at an individual level. If you look at the the job market, if I may speak for the NGO sector, we have lots of jobs in the NGO sector because of shrinking funding support. And I don't know the scale that is in other sectors. And that affects, again, the cost of living and people who are deriving a living from those jobs. If you look at the cost of food, which affects an ordinary trader in the market with increased transport costs, although the cost of fuel is coming down, but the period it has taken shooting up has had also an impact on the traders, plus the customers and the purchasing power of the citizens. But at the national level, I think there are key challenges from my observation side. The rate of growth, the PSST has spoken about it, which seems slow and slower with our contemporaries in the neighborhood countries. If you look at public expenditure, I don't know what we can do as a country to really tame our spending appetite. Every other day, government seems to be creating avenues for spending money other than generating revenue. And of course, we have a challenge of high population growth, which again affects our GDP growth and overall economic growth as a country. And that is also a key political issue that we must confront, because if you look at the difference between the neighboring countries, I think our figures economically show differently, mainly because of high population growth that cannot, yes, if our population growth rate is higher than Kenya and Tanzania, we are at 3.4%, and then the other countries are at 3.1 and 2.5 respectively. That has an impact on the general growth as a country. And then the challenge, of course, of accruing domestic areas, accruing debt, both domestic and the general public debt, and the central bank performance in regards to supply-oriented inflation as compared to demand-driven inflation. And maybe it would be good for PSST to comment about the recent headline of Bank of Uganda debt of 11 trillion and what's happening, which seems to be above the recommended borrowing levels for Bank of Uganda. And why are we failing to offset it? And then, of course, we need to look at the overview of the economy. I know that our topic is from independence, but we've started from today. We will go backwards. But what are our pillars, what are our drivers of the economy today? If you look at knowledge, knowledge economy should be driven by skills together with infrastructure in the population. So if you look at innovation, trade, and talent, where majority young people would benefit most, especially in innovation and talent, how are we doing as a country in terms of ICT support, in terms of skilling, the level of skills in the country, but also our trade balance? How are we faring? What is the status of our economy? What are the drivers? What are the production strategies? Where are we focusing on? Where do we have comparative advantage as a country?
Good. Honorable Mapenduzi, I want you to speak to some of these issues on top of what Sarah has talked about, the cost of living, and especially when you look at the lives that I'm receiving. We shall read some of them and sample some of the comments and questions coming from the public. But so far, the four that I'm seeing very in a snapshot, all of them are talking about the cost of living, being so high. And how does government help to stem that kind of problem? And how bad is it from where you sit? You've been meeting local governments at different levels and around the country. How are they managing? How are they trying to reduce the shocks? And how can Ministry of Finance, represented by the man himself here seated, help in some of these challenges?
Thank you. I want to start from, there are two important points that were mentioned by the two gentlemen, Dr. and Honorable Powell. Doctor said, we are doing well, and as an indication, the Uganda Revenue Authority went above their projection for the last 2 months in Q1, and he said the excess is above 50 billion, which is good, and that's a good sign, because if we are able to generate such local revenue, then it's an indication that because you cannot give what you don't have. So it's a good indicator. But the other point mentioned by Honorable Paul Omara is that, yes, we could be generating more, but there is that refusal to spend. And I think Doctor actually agreed and said as a control measure, they to be careful in their spending, in releasing money, especially for Q1. So those are two very important messages that the country needs to take. Yes, we are doing well, but there are measures being taken. Now, globally, we know that, and especially things to do with inflation. Dealing with inflation will definitely cause some serious discomfort, but discomforts that are kind of short-term. As long as the end result is going to be reducing on the level of inflation and keeping the economy running, and also the people having the opportunity to have a meaningful cost of life, not very high. So, and therefore, the steps being taken by our economists, by Doctor and the team, to deal with the question of, rising in inflation is something that it's necessary. It's necessary. Yes, it is discomforting, but we need to accept that we need to deal with this question before it turns, he said he would term that as cancerous. But it needs to be treated before we are overwhelmed as a country. So I think the decision being taken by Doctor and the team is a good one. The only question is, how do we do it so that we don't create more problem? Because in trying to deal with inflation, using whatever measures we want to, if we are not careful, we are likely to create a lot more impact that may end up prolonging the struggle or the efforts. I'll give this example, and this comes to the question you asked. Last week, the committee I chair was in eastern Uganda, in Busoga and Bugiso, where we interacted with so many local government entities. And so when Doctor says they decided not to release, it is true. The information is sharing is true. But where we saw a bit of a problem, actually a big problem, is that in trying to cut down, you are affecting areas that would play a big role in propelling growth. I'll give just a few examples. One example is the funding for road funds. Now, this is money sent to local government entities to help in making sure that there is accessibility. Roads are in good condition so that the common man and woman is able to transport their goods to the market. And we know that about 70% of our people rely on agriculture. And these are people who need the roads to be in good shape so they can transport. And looking at the time right now, this is harvest period and so on. And then you decide to cut by not just 50%, you cut by almost 90%. So I'll give you an example of Bujiri district, a district that approved a budget of about 800 million as road fund money. And they have about 500 kilometers of road network that they have to maintain. So there are people who are very much involved in agricultural activities are able to move and access the market. So meaning if their budget is 800 million in a financial year under road fund for maintaining roads and so on, if you are to release that on a quarterly basis, you are releasing approximately 200 million. But here is a district that received only 20 million from 200 million. So in other words, you are releasing just about 10%, and they are not able to do much. So the problem we see in the community then is that, yes, we are coming from a difficult period of COVID and so on. And we are trying to get out of that and keeping the economy running. But then in trying to deal with some of the effects that came with COVID and other related matters, we are then affecting certain sectors that will contribute in making sure that we propel the efforts, the growth and all that. So these are areas that need to be looked at critically. So the question of whether our people down there are feeling what Doctor is saying, that yes, we are doing good, we are generating more, the economy is, that impact is not being felt. And that's where Dr. Sarah says prices are too high, people are not...
We can't afford life.
That's according to a gentleman, I think Mr. Robert Kabusheka, he said we can't afford life, but this is a life, thank God. But on a serious note, I think we need to critically look at, Doctor needs to look at, even when we want to continue in Q2 with the measures to deal with inflation and stabilize the economy and all that, I think we need to try to a lot more prioritize so that certain sectors that would keep us a lot more vibrant are not very much affected. Okay. But obviously, we have to support measures that will looking at long term. And I think that's where we need to carefully look at it. Because if, again, we relax, and just like he said, a few months ago, we were talking about 5%. Today, 9%. That is worrying. If we don't deploy measures that would very quickly try to neutralize. So these are things that
maybe that should take us into in the next round, that should take us into some of the things that Sarah mentioned, for example, the pillars, of production. Maybe that's where we should now be going, because you see what you're saying is contradictory, because what Doctor is saying they have done and that you're saying should be done is exactly what is leading to the problem you're analyzing.
Well, what I am saying is, yes, there is need to take control measures, but how we do it matters. And because we need to see where we channel our energies.
They think that is the right thing they have done.
And they are creating more problems.
And that has caused more problem. So you cannot say that they should do it.
Charles,
yeah?
Charles, my brother here, all the points he has made, if you summarize it, he's agreeing with me, not him. The summary of what he has said.
I like that part.
Absolutely. I just want to go back to Dr. Ramadan. Yeah, Dr. Ramadan, I think when he's coming here, he should come with humility. Because the farthest he has done is been a lecturer. He has not mixed theory with practice. This is his first. So when he comes here and he says, people should talk with knowledge and facts. For us, some of us, we have been in the game for too long. and it needs to come with respect. That's my first submission. The Bank of Uganda report, the latest report which I've seen, which I've read, is August. If it's privy to any information which is talking about the inflation is now at 9%, maybe because of his position. I have not seen it in the public domain. What the Bank of Uganda released in August is talking of inflation headline being at 7.9.
7.9, yeah.
I still insist, and many people have sent information in a similar way. His strategy, as always, when it comes to this kind of debate, is to disparage anybody who is having a contra view. That's not the best way of debating. You don't undermine people who are giving facts. I think what he has is alternative facts. But let me be very specific about the strategy which they have adopted. URA will report to you that many businesses, after 2 years of closure during COVID, have closed.
Yes.
Many businesses have closed.
That's true.
URA is doing a lot of work to collect money. And if they continue the way they are doing, and I'm happy they have really, factually, it's true that they have collected in excess. For how long will they continue to collect that money if we don't invest back into the economy? Because for him, his strategy is inflation. And he has not commented whether withholding back money will generate more growth in the economy. Bank of Uganda has given a very worrying view about where we are going. Actually, they are worried about the growth of our economy. They projected it to grow at between 2%, 2.5% to 3% at best this financial year. And if Dr. Ramadan continues with the perception, with the view that not investing in the economy is the best alternative, I would even wonder which economic school he went to. Because Bank of Uganda actually is doing a good job, a good job in controlling inflation by using those debt instruments. Because they're basically sucking in money from the economy, using those debt instruments. Now, you cannot at the same time, this is of Paul O'Mara's economics, you cannot at the same time hold back almost 90% of what you're supposed to spend in Q1 and hold it back and you say, I'm doing a great job. That's his theory. That is not practice. And Charles, this is, and the viewers, this is the impact of what Dr. and his colleagues at the Ministry of Finance have done. That decision which they have taken. One, for example, if you provide money under PDM, somebody goes and buys seeds, and the rain is there now, he plants it, he buys something of 10,000, he sells after 3-4 months 100,000. The GDP has grown, the economy has grown. You have withheld the PDM money, and yet the idea was, the government was saying, let the common man make the choices of their destiny, what they're going to invest this money on. You have not provided that money. They are in the same position. They are coming from COVID where they have not done nothing. That is going to be a big problem. So the growth will be muted. Number two, every MP in Parliament is crying about the roads up country. The roads are collapsing everywhere you go. Bridges are collapsing, roads are collapsing. Then what kind of economy will you have? What kind of growth will you have where you cannot even transport your goods within, within the districts and within other places? Because roads are basically collapsing. Because they have withheld money for roads. That is another aspect of it. Then, and doctor, you know that the money supply is a factor of the GDP of that country, of goods and services put together. That money supply is normally determined by Bank of Uganda. And they would know what quantity should be in the economy, and they can control it using those debt instruments. You really don't have to come on the fiscal side of the thing. Another aspect which I'm worried about is that as much as our officials from finance, they sit in those nice offices, banks are making foreclosures on many businesses. The loans they have borrowed, they cannot, the money is not there. So the bank says, you're already in arrears 3 months, we close you. Businesses are collapsing. They need to think about it. And that comes to my pet subject of domestic arrears. You have not paid. Even the ministries that have offered services to government, the UNRWA, people who have gone to the bank to borrow, they cannot function. So I really want to submit again that we must be very, very careful. And that's why I always asked, who are the economists who advise the president? Because if you have this kind of thinking, where people feel now they are going down, they are stampeded to go and start spending money, because the country is crying. It's a national strategic risk. If Parliament approves a budget, we have a budget plan, we have a cash flow plan. How did you just suddenly withhold money without talking to anybody? You just sit and say, we have the powers to do it. So we are going to hold the Ministry of Finance accountable as Parliament for not spending the money we have approved. It's just unacceptable. They did the 40% last financial year. This one here, we are not accepting.
Okay.
And I'm just giving him a red herring that Parliament, as we speak today, people are very unhappy. Even ministers, they cannot talk, but they will touch you and say, we're not working. We don't have money.
Okay.
So Dr. Ramadan, we know economics, we know finance, we know element of money supply, inflation. Those are simple matters. But please don't put the country at ransom by failing to spend money. And I have already assured you, you are not our bosses. The bosses are the people outside there. Any economic plan and policy must be done with the people in mind. It's not about what the Minister of Finance wants. So where we are seated, we are going to hold you accountable, and starting next week, we will have that conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know Gobi is itching to respond, but let me ask for a break right now, and then when we come back, I will bring in, there are some 2-3 pertinent feedback from the people that are crisscrossing into the discussion as the discussion is being had, and then I will invite Gobi to respond to some of the issues. And this is behind the headlines, and the discussion is around the economy, the economic performance, and we are hosting the permanent secretary to the Treasury, Gobi Ramadan, together with Omara, who is an MP and sits on the budget committee, with the panelists Honorable Mapenduzi and Sarah Brete. Let's take that break right now.
Do you need data collection services, data analysis and reporting, monitoring and evaluation systems? Then contact Mold Technologies, a professional research firm that has provided many organizations with timely research solutions for over 15 years. For more information, visit www.mt.co.ug or call us on 0704 913 399 or 0782 602 963. Visit our office in Kampala at Sayuni Complex in Tinda. Mood Technologies, your professional research firm.
Vimba ni MTN Kabode Super as you pay mpola for this smartphone. Make calls, update your WhatsApp status, watch YouTube, and Google anything under the sun with 2 GB worth of data every month for 7 months. Simply make a small deposit of 99k and pay the balance mpola. You can pay in daily, weekly, or even monthly installments while you enjoy your new phone. So what are you doing today? Visit any MTN shop near you and get the MTN Kabode Super easy.
Cooking with electricity is now affordable. Cook your beans. Avoid smoke.
Sayaka. Cooking with electricity is now so affordable with the Fumba tariff set by the Electricity Regulatory Authority. With the Fumba tariff, you can now buy up to 70 units of Yaka at a reduced price of 412 Uganda shillings per unit after consuming your first 80 units of the month. For more information, contact the Electricity Regulatory Authority on 0200 506 000.
Beat the back-to-school hustle today. Pay school fees conveniently using Airtel Money. Dial *185#. Select option 6, school fees.
Select to pay using Bridge Schools, School Pay or Beg Pay.
Select option 1, pay fees. Enter student number. Enter the amount. Enter the PIN number to complete payment. Airtel Money. Instant, secure, borderless.
Welcome back from the break, and it's getting more interesting, and I need to bring in the bosses, my bosses, the people out there for whom we have all these discussions. But before that, just to remind you, this is Behind the Headlines, and we are discussing the economy. We are looking at the dynamics and the perspectives, and my producer says there are too many questions and comments. I just need to sample a few. I just want to see a few of them on screen so that we can come back into the studio with perspectives from the public that is viewing us right now. Let's have those comments and questions. Can the producer give me the questions and comments so that we can have them? But if someone has said, Charles, I have not been paid for the service that I rendered for government. I offer service to government, and government has been complaining about lack of money. And how do I then pay the loan I took? And the loan is accumulating interest. And is there really money when the authorities we serve are saying that there is no money, there is a problem of liquidity? What is the PS talking about? Then someone called Michael from Kaberamaido says, it is a fact that as Dr. Gobi controls outflow of money from the ministry, the rates of different prices are still increasing. And can I have the questions or comments that have come from? There is one from Mandua, thank you. There is one from Mandua Martin from Marua City. He says the PS. Mandua Martin, it is your opinion against the PS. You cannot call the PS a liar. If you have a contrary view, just submit it, and let's test which one is true and give us the authority. You have no right to call someone who has submitted based on a fact they have, and they are in the kitchen. You have no right to call them a liar. Let's have some respect. But Alfred from Mobile says, please tell the PS to help me explain why the price of sugar has all of a sudden gone up to almost 5,000 from 3,600 some few weeks back, yet it is manufactured within Uganda. Thanks, Alfred. John Abajo from Chengera town says, what strategies does the PSST have to tame the current inflation, which is imported in nature? What about other economic challenges such as a riding debt burden, youth unemployment, a budget that is donor funded, among others? Sabila Godfrey from Mbale. Sabila says, I like the analogy that our economy is diseased. Who is the right doctor to give the correct panadol to the disease? Is it the PSST or Bank of Uganda? That's a good one. Talking of analogy. Musungu James from Manafwa says, Uganda's economy has experienced positive growth. However, PSST ought to pay much attention to the SMEs, which make up to 95%. Is it 95%? By enabling them access high quality inputs, cost-effective electricity, and affordable credit. And David Mutatina says, my question goes to Ndugu Ramadhan Gobi. Why does he think that controlling money in circulation at the expense of general economic welfare of Ugandans is the best way to control inflation? Is this the economy that works, that he promised the nation? Semujo Faizo from Rubaga says, Mr. Gobi is justifying the so-called growth. But to me, Omuntu Awansi, that growth is not reflected in my pockets. Government keeps on borrowing within the economy internally, and it's crowding out the private sector and also widening the debt burden on us. That is Semujo Faizo. Then Patrick from Lira says, PS, indeed, for reality, most people in local government have not got salaries for the last 2 to 3 months, including Lira, and those whose salaries were not increased. In fact, all what has been achieved by his predecessor, Keith, is going to waste. Dennis from Bududa, Mr. Gobi said, the name is Gobi, double G, double O, not Ngobi. But anyway, the question stands. Said local government workers' salaries are delaying due to enhancement. But in Bududa district, the parish chiefs who were recruited in November have not been paid since June and not enrolled on payroll. My question is, did the government budget for new recruits, or the economy has brought reallocation of funds to scientists and leaving parish chiefs without salary? Okay. Talking of analogy, the good thing, I like your analogies. Being a teacher, you'd make them so well. Now, for me, my analogy as a question in response is, just imagine, and I am not an economist in class, but just a typical Ugandan. If dad keeps coming home, that we have made today 1 million shillings. He comes home the next day, we have made 2 million shillings. He comes, after 1 week, he comes home, and mom is saying, we don't have sugar, we don't have this. And then daddy is refusing to release money. The money that daddy keeps bringing is the analogy for the 53 billion plus. You know, John is collecting money. URA is collecting money. But you decide not to buy the essentials, i.e. the salaries that you should be paying us. And many of the workers that you pay, we are your employees, and I mean across the country. How do we then term that type of economics where dad makes money but does not want to buy things in the house? Gobi. For me, that is the basic that I want to ask. There is another question
I wanted to put. So
that is what someone is also asking.
Yeah, can I just... Doctor said
just
something.
A question.
Yes, it's a question. He talked about districts that, local government entities especially, that have not been able to pay salaries. Yesterday, there was a letter flying all over from Masindi District Local Government, where the Chief Administrative Officer wrote saying he would not be able to pay September salary for specific departments: production, secondary education, natural resources, and so on. And he cited the issue of supplementary, which you also talked about. My concern or question to you is, we experienced a similar thing last year with many local government entities that needed supplementary. But it took almost 6 months to have the supplementary handle. Now, we are ending Q1 this month, and we haven't. You are saying you have almost concluded that process. So my question is, are we going to have a similar experience like last year, when it took more than 6 months to handle supplementaries, or we are going to have these supplementaries handled as soon as possible, so a district like Masindi is able to pay next month? Because looks like the supplementary process is not yet even done. So
let me answer that one, Honorable, very quickly. Number one, all the local governments that and also government ministries and departments and other agencies that had enhancement of salary of scientists and the other workers who were enhanced, and they are supposed to get supplementary, they are going to get this money this month. We are going to front load all of the money so that they are able to pay all of the people on time. What was delaying was not the processing of supplementary, it was the working of the numbers by Ministry of Public Service together with those very local governments and the ministries and the departments and agencies and my ministry, getting the numbers right. Because as I told you at the beginning, the enhancement of these salaries, the money came, I mean, the approval of those supplementaries by cabinet came when the year had already started, particularly for science teachers. It took some time.
But Mr. PSST, wasn't the enhancement for scientists in the budget?
Yes,
because when
part of
artists were demonstrating, said the budget is already done.
Part of it was in the budget, especially covering the science, those other scientists who are not science teachers. But as you remember, they were back and forth until when the budget had already been approved by Parliament, appropriated. That's when the ones for science teachers came.
That's true.
So it delayed a bit to come in. That's why it's going to be a supplementary, together with our military officers.
But doctor, again,
no, let him
so
answer.
there is no going to be.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's fine. Thank you.
Yes, there is not going to be any challenge going forward. We are going to front load them, and they pay wage normally, and then as and when we sort out the supplementaries, they will get more money to pay.
In other words, you're saying, much as it is a supplementary,
yes,
you are going to pay before the approval processes,
yes,
and then it will be done retrospectively.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what they call front loading, giving them the money which they already have in the budget, and waiting now to cover the gap which would have been created by the supplementary, which also itself is under the 3%. So Charles, your analogy, it doesn't really, I think, create any challenge, because the issue is not that people are not paid because somebody is holding on their money, that they shouldn't be paid. No. As I've told you, and usually whenever there is a beginning of the financial year, adjustment of accounts and so on, usually leads to delay of monies. This time it was unfortunately on the wage because of what I've told you. They had the enhanced people and they had to work out numbers, and they have been working out these numbers. You know, we have still a challenge with the payroll issues. The data is not as smart as it should be, and we are working to make it smarter so that we can be able to pay people. The point is, by 28th of every month, every civil servant, every public servant should be paid their wage. And that is going to be the case after sorting out these issues. Now, coming back to the issues, number one, to Sarah, I think, Sarah, you are right on the fact that much as there has been a growth after COVID, some promising recovery, which also has been impacted a bit by the ongoing other shocks because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which caused more shortages of goods, especially fuel and other logistical aspects, which has impacted us further. There has now been the issue of cost of living. And this cost of living, the reality is, it is caused by the inflation. Because of inflation rising, people, the money they are receiving now
Has no value.
is less in value than what they would be having if the inflation had remained below 5. So whenever that's why we don't like inflation at all, because even if you give people more money, well, as long as inflation rises further, that money ceases to be enough, you know, of value. And please, when it comes to inflation, never listen to someone who's really joking with it. It's like, as I told you, and that analogy was very well thought out, it's equivalent to cancer. When a patient has cancer, doctors will tell you, are going to get the blood out of you. Very painful process, but they are trying their level best to make you survive. Well, of course you can say, and also they are going to remove all your hair. They remove all your hair. You can't say, now my beauty. No, it's about now treating the cancer. After that, we shall go back to the beauty aspects. So anyone who's talking about growth, affecting growth, affecting whatever you want to say, you are joking with inflation, really. Yeah, you need to be serious with it. We are not just being funny. We are trying our level best, because what are the drivers of our inflation? We know them: food, fuel, and then the fast-moving goods, but particularly food and fuel this time, and of course the foreign exchange. Now, with the food, it was because we had a bad harvest, relatively bad harvest, the last season. The rains have come now, and within about 3-4 months, hopefully we are going to have food, and we shall be over that curve, and the cost of living is likely to reduce with the inflation. The same with the fuel. The fuel prices globally now have started to peak. I mean, they are no longer rising, especially crude oil. It has peaked. That's why you see now even the pump prices have started to stabilize. And in some areas, they have started now to get bit down. Yes. So within no time, you will see our cost of living also a little bit getting back to normal, with inflation going down. And these are changes you are seeing in prices stabilizing and peaking, although some are still rising, especially food prices. It's not by chance or by miracle. It's because of deliberate policy. You know, a policy maker is like a doctor. You know, usually a doctor can be touching you and you feel is actually causing more pain when he's trying to help you to get better. On the public expenditure, this one, we have cut it, Sarah. We have cut public expenditure. And this is the debate we are having. That's why Honorable Murray is uncomfortable. Because we are not releasing the money to the public servants the way we released it the other quarter 4 of last financial year. You have released relatively less money. Honorable Murray is uncomfortable with that. But it's the right thing to do now to reduce a bit on the public expenditure. If the public servants have been having 2 million shillings of fuel, let them have 1 or 500,000. And that will reduce the demand for fuel, because the supply of fuel, you can't force it to increase. So what you have to do is to reduce a little bit on the demand. And then the filling stations now will also start to look at ways of cutting the price. And eventually you will be home and dry.
And then Total, Shell, and the rest will not pay good taxes?
Yes, you have to, you know, economics, Charles, is about trade-offs.
True.
All the time, whoever thinks that you are not going to trade off anything,
Opportunity cost.
you are not an economist. Economics is about trade-off. You have to trade off one thing and you do something else. You have to pick alternatives. And that's what we are trying to do. Now, with the Bank of Uganda debt you are talking about, Bank of Uganda
trillion.
itself has responded yesterday, I think, on this very allegation by, again, the politicians. How we have overborrowed from Bank of Uganda against the law, and it is there for everybody on the website of Bank of Uganda. Bank of Uganda has told you that's not true. We are the banker to the government, and the government has never borrowed that money. So that one I don't want to go far. It's not even government which had to respond. Bank of Uganda has responded to that, and we shall formally also make a response to Parliament, because that record was put to Parliament to rectify that. And that's where, in that very article which was written in the Monitor, they called me and I told them, please, kindly tell our leaders that everywhere in the world right now, they are fighting to ensure that they recover their economies from the dual shocks of the pandemic and what's going on now. We shouldn't be spending time here trying to create crises where they are not, trying to alarm the environment and the public with the information which is not true. I know people are not happy because perhaps they are broke because of what's going on. All of us, we don't have enough money now. It's because of the situation which is going on everywhere. The other weekend I was in Tokyo, Japan. I went there because Uganda was invited by World Bank to speak to our fellow developing countries on how best to manage a terrible situation, a crisis like now. And I was invited as Secretary of the Treasury to speak to other African countries, Latin America and so on how to avoid making mistakes, how to manage the debt situation, how to avoid doing things like the subsidies and so on. Why? Because we had this conversation here in Kampala, and the World Bank thought we are well suited now to be a benchmark in helping others to manage a situation. And when I tell you what is happening in that super rich country called Japan, this is a multi-billion-dollar country, but everything is down. Buildings are empty. Roads and streets are empty. Everybody is masked. COVID has affected. Toyota is not actively producing. It's producing at 30%. That's why you find now you can't easily get a new car. In government, there are some cars we are trying to buy. They take 10 months, a year to get a car because they are not being produced. Sony, you can't go to Sony and you get a product. So these shocks, Charles, the COVID and what's happening, it's not something somebody should really joke around with. And I would want all of us to have a concerted effort on how do we recover our economy, how do we take even advantage of the situation. That we shall do once we get the inflation out of the way. So we have those drivers of the economy today focused on. I'm talking of the services, the finance, the telecoms, and trade, especially wholesale and retail trade. The manufacturing in Uganda. We have supported it. That's why it has been resilient. It has taken advantage of COVID through import replacement, and now you can see that it is the one supporting this growth and the relative revenue we are getting. We are getting it from those sectors, of course, with the agro-industrialization. Now, finally, to the questions you have been talking about, but it also Honorable Mapendus, he made a wonderful submission And the Honorable, these anti-inflation measures, and you are right, they are short-term, and they are of course painful, but definitely we are going to get out of this situation very, very soon. In a few months, we shall go back to our normal programming, like the way you go to a hospital and they treat you. You will go and undergo some pain. You can't say, no, for me, you better leave me in my situation. No. And I hear you on the need to balance the caution with also the need to support certain key sectors, certain key institutions. Of course, as you are aware, we released some more funding for local governments to do through the road fund to repair some of our roads. We have also programmed more funding for them in Q2, including also the certificates to be paid for the companies which are constructing. And the Honorable Mara was talking about domestic arrears. The first thing we did this very quarter, where we have been quite mean, we front-loaded. We gave all the farms the money which we had in the budget, the domestic arrears. We paid over 660 billion. It's the money which we had, and we paid it to all of these suppliers, especially the small suppliers who had supplied government. So we are really mindful of all of that. So economics is about these trade-offs. To our viewers, the price of sugar rising, it is because of shortage of cane. Shortage of sugar cane because of the bad season that we had, as I've told you. But also I've heard that there are other factors which led to the cane to disappear. The other season, the farmers thought that they were being underpaid, and some of them, I think, pulled out of production of cane. But the main factor I've heard is the poor harvest, which we had, the poor season. And of course, also the inflation which we are having is being driven partly by that increase in the sugar prices. On the controlling money to control inflation, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Ugandans, I repeat, for you to fight inflation, inflation is main way of manifesting itself is by having too much money chasing a few goods. What COVID did, it reduced the supply of goods and services. And what we have to do now is to ensure that the amount of goods and services in supply match with the amount of money that should chase them, so that we have the prices managed. But the moment you think that by getting more money into the economy, you will actually have growth amidst inflation, you are hiding your head in the sun. You will actually have more inflation, and then you will need more money to be found, which means more borrowing or printing of money. That's how actually this economy used to be managed. I came actually thinking we are going to discuss that historical bit of the economy. Because this economy Honorable Mara was talking about here, the way is saying we should manage it. That's how it used to be managed in the 1970s, 1980s, early 80s there.
No money, print more.
Too much inflation, pour more money in the economy, cause more inflation, go and print more, pour more, until some sober people came and they said this is not how economics is done. And they cut expenditure, they cut money, supply, they locked up money. They even sold the machine which at one time Uganda owned a machine to print money. We don't have one. And that's how that history, we should actually avoid it by ensuring that we manage the economy in a more sustainable way.
Okay.
The best sustainable way is to coordinate fiscal policy with the monetary policy.
Charles.
There is someone here who has said, who is talking about roads, that all community access roads in the entire country are impassable. Our economy is agro-based. You don't fund production, you're going to create more paralysis. And talking of an economy, last week we had a discussion on infrastructure with one of the ministers, and some of the things that kept coming, questions that kept coming, and I will be direct. One of them, like Honorable Mapenduzi talked about, we are talking about PDM, we are talking about PDM and having one of its pillars being infrastructure development. Back home in Nebi, an entire road that is going to, that leads to Congo, that market is now cut off completely.
By the rains.
By the rains. And it started even earlier. Then that is the Nebi, Goli, Zombo Road. And then when a minister is contacted, the minister says there is no money. Then when the representatives of the people try to follow up more, in the planning, that now you have changed your planning system. You now plan according to the NDP3, like right now, which goes up to 5 years. Now the question is, you are the person who releases money, and now if a road which is critical like that and now cut off, so people cannot access the market, is cut off like that, at what point will you get the money to fund that road to be done so that it enhances production, market access, and all that? Is it possible in these 5 years where that road particularly is not even in the plan of UNRWA?
It is not in the plan of UNRWA.
For the next 5
But
years.
the emergence also works, which are done. UNRWA, usually they get money for emergency constructions and means of works, and also defense. They have been working on these roads, and we shall continue to do that. If it is not in the NDP3, of course it will not be done in this period, in terms of tarmacking it, and so what is going to be done is to ensure that maintenance is improved and put more money on emergency works to maintain it. And the government has already taken that decision on getting more money for maintenance of infrastructure, because we've had a big number of, especially Dukas, not very well maintained, as well as even the Tamaka roads which we have built, sunk in a lot of money, but maintenance was receiving very little money. We are going to be moving. I think my minister made that statement clear when he was presenting the budget strategy for next year. This financial year, of course, it will be the implementation of what the budget which they appropriated. And if that road, unfortunately, is not in the budget, it has to only be catered for under the emergency works.
Under the emergency works?
Yes.
So that has to be the sector ministry to pursue, or the people, or the...
You have already pursued.
Charles.
I can see.
Charles.
I can see.
I think
no, mine is not enough. Mine is just to tickle the people to pursue, but I need them. I'm sure they are listening to you.
Oh, Charles, there was one thing.
Yes.
There's a gentleman who talked of new recruits and parish chiefs. I want to assure that gentleman that parish chiefs have their wage in the budget, which the parliament appropriated.
Okay.
The new recruits, those who were newly recruited and had been recruited by the various agencies with the approval or authorization of Minister of Public Service, on availability of wage and so on, they are all going to get their pension.
Yes, Honorable Mara, you...
Charles, when you were opening, you said that the Minister of Finance came to Parliament and said there is actually no money. I'm prompted to believe that what the Secretary is doing is basically putting a face. I'm not sure the money is there. So
but you earlier also agreed that there were surplus collections from URA. You agreed on that.
Yeah,
and I'm sure that Gobi gets his money only from URA.
No, not only from URA.
So
what I mean is that they are known sources.
I agreed with him because
primarily from
URA is a performance issue. You are given a target per quarter to achieve. So that target doesn't amount to being, having enough money to meet the entire budget or the quarter releases.
Yeah, so
so he has even been given a limit through a Chapter for Fiscal Responsibility to borrow money. And of course, the challenge which is there is that the IMF has issues with the dip with the Bank of Uganda, which actually the law allows finance to borrow money up to 10% of the projected revenue, that both tax and non-tax revenue by the URA. So that's in the law. If they have exceeded now, that's another issue. But from what he has submitted is that there's nothing extra. The point I want to make, Charles, is that I agree with Dr. Ramadan that inflation should be controlled. And controlling, we should leave it with the Bank of Uganda.
Why?
A moment with Bank of Uganda to do it using those monetary instruments. But a moment the ministry also now bring the fiscal, I've already given you the explanation, the impact of that. And he's saying it's like cancer. I just don't know whether a 7.9% or 9% would require both instruments to be used to kill it. For me, I would describe it as an overkill. It's just like getting a sledgehammer to kill a fly. They would have actually be prudent enough to give a window, as I've argued before, for an investment to really happen, for us to reboot the economy. Because if we just stay like that, the repercussions would be, in fact, the people will come and even chase us away from Parliament. The second point... The
people in the constituencies?
Yeah, the people in the constituency, because the roads are getting cut. If during the Prime Minister's time,
including you,
most of the MPs standing up are raising issues of roads being cut off, and there is no support to do that. And Dr. Ramadan, you also need to think about the aggregate demand. If that demand is not there, even the factories that are working, they will also work, produce, and there will be nobody to buy those goods because we would have extracted, their power, the purchasing power, out of the economy totally.
I have a question, Honorable.
Yeah.
You, of course, we are talking about the economy and Bank of Uganda. I don't know whether the post of Bank of Uganda governor is ceremonial, because we are now in this 8th month without a governor. Is it ceremonial? Is Parliament bothered? Should we do without it?
Is there anything that stops the deputy governor from working?
So is it ceremonial? Do we need a governor or not?
But, Charles,
I was adding
Dr. Sarah, Dr. Sarah, my personal view is that Dr. Michael Atingego is a very competent banker, and there is nothing that he wouldn't do that another governor would do.
But there is a constitutional post.
Yes, I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade.
It's not about competence. It's about constituting an entity.
That is the president's prerogative. So,
but Parliament is not helping.
What can we do? We don't appoint governors. Is the president. Charles, there is another important point I think which Dr. Ramadan raised. I think before we finish, we need to look at the history, how the economy has been. And I want to start like this, that after...
Do it in 1 minute and let everybody touch on it.
Yes.
And then, because I wanted us also in about some two minutes, touch on the impact of the EU
Yes,
the EU resolution that the Ugandans have described as annoying resolution
yes,
or against ECO.
Charles, the post-independence economy has been rather tumultuous. We had moments of complete downturns where the economy almost went down, and also we've had moments of progress. The first UPC government inherited an economy from the British government, which was basically how do I call it, a market-driven economy. And most of the factories that were there were mainly owned by the Indian nationals, and also in the main, the trade. But something was also happening. At the time of independence, most of the nationalist parties, including UPC, were basically, very buoyant. They were against imperialism, colonialism. And so as much as Dr. Obote inherited a market-centered economy, soon later he joined this Manguluguzi club. Manguluguzi, what do we used to call it?
It was
Manguluguzi, something like that. Where it had Dr. Nyerere, President Nyerere, and Kaunda. And their orientation was socialism. So fast forward, at around 69 there, Obote developed this idea of the common man's charter, a move to the left.
It was more socialist.
More socialist. And with the Nakivubu pronouncement in 1969, he basically nationalized 60% of those companies, most of the private companies. And this included banks and even private companies. And that is why Uganda actually owned most of these companies that you see later. Now, but very quickly, Amin overthrew the government in 71. But I should mention, and Dr. Ramadan is here, when Obote left in 71, our debt, the country's total debt, was $160 million. And the GDP was $1.5 billion. The GDP in 1971 was $1.5 billion. The total population was 9.5 million people. And the debt, our national debt, was 160 million. So then come Idi Amin. Idi Amin, we had this economic crisis where he decided to send away the Indians in 1972. Most of the financial institutions, especially global, refused to give Amin money. So Amin managed Uganda with the little money that he was getting from coffee. And therefore, the only institutions that could give him money were the Islamic-based banks and governments. But the debt only increased by the time Amin was overthrown. The total debt of the country was less than $600 million. And the GDP...
The right name of the club is Mulungushi.
Mulungushi. Mulungushi Club, yes.
That debating club.
Yes.
Yeah, and thanks Didson Masiko for reminding me.
Yes. So but Obote's first government is considered to be one of the best in our history, because in 9 years only they built 22 hospitals, national hospitals across the country, and many schools were built. There was a free education. The railway to Pakwach was connected. And by the way, we still had tribal borders. We had to get which one belongs to your clan. The districts were being created. So that was the first batch of the UPC government. Of course, the Amin, with the chasing away of the Indians, brought in a real crisis. You had Magendo, where people were now selling things, The economy literally collapsed by the time Amin was sent in 79. But we should take it on record that the debt Amin left behind was below $600 million. And the GDP at the time was 2.1 billion shillings. And so the UPC government came, got a crumbled economy, and exactly where Dr. Ramadan was talking about, Obote put in place what they call economic and social recovery program. And at the time, Obote had abandoned the crazy idea of a move to the left and brought in the IMF. In fact, it is said that the IMF had advised him to bring the best economists from the Commonwealth, who really assisted him to see how best that economy could be rebuilt. There was no money in the coffers. And one of the key people, the Ugandan who was in that group, was Professor Mutabile. He was a young economist who actually helped to put a lot of things together. And the economy started growing between 1983 to 84. And of course there was that war. Obote tried to print money, and I want to agree with him. He printed a lot of money. At one point, he increased salaries of public servants by 50%. And the coffers were basically empty. And it was relying so much on IMF, and there was a cost of war. The inflation, which he's talking about, went up to 107%. Inflation in Obote too. So that is why now it was like we were going to Zimbabwe way in terms of the inflationary
You carry
levels.
money on a wheelbarrow to buy 2 kilos of sugar.
Exactly. And so when Obote left, the debt of our country was actually $1.17 billion. That was 1985 when he left. That was the level of our national debt. And the GDP was in the range of about $3.5 billion. And the issue which we are talking about, the debt servicing ratio, was almost 80%. Every little money that was being collected would be used for payments of debts. And so therefore the economy was in really big problems.
But how does that compare? I was reading some document from, is it the United Nations, I think, Development Program?
Yeah.
And they said by 1985, the Human Development Index, we were at the same level with Kenya. 1985. That's Uganda, Kenya, same level, I think 0.4 something. Today, we are in the low level, and Kenya is median. I think Uganda is number 26 in Africa. Kenya is number, I think, in the second group. The highest group has about 10, Egypt, Seychelles, and some countries. How do those compare? When our economy was doing badly, our Human Development Index, which I think is a summary, almost like a summary of our economic performance and other things. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
The Obote II's government, first of all, did not have money. The treasury was empty. They were basically struggling to survive. And because of executing the war as well, so there was no money, and they ended up printing cash, which Dr. Ramadan is talking about, to pay people, just to keep the morale up, to pay the army, to pay the public servants, because you just imagine increasing salaries by 50%, and you have less goods and services.
When the one is talking about restructuring, just not even 20% is causing also
causing problems. So Obote 1 was actually the best. 2, not at all. Okay. Amin had a very muted time. And let me go to 86.
Very fast. We need
now 86. When NRM came, they did some radical reforms, which was basically around liberalization and then privatization. Those two words. And liberalization basically to allow the free market.
Yeah.
So
opening
that
up forex,
the foreign currency our local currency
and
became convertible.
Divesting itself of business.
Yes, and privatization, although there was an overkill, again on privatization, there were certain institutions which we should not have privatized. Because in the 60s, when Obote actually enhanced UDC to become a conduit for modernization and privatization, over time there were almost 36 subsidiaries that came out of it, and 22 companies. So that is what was sold in post-1986. And we should have kept, now in hindsight, UCB, because no bank is willing to go and give money downstream because of the risk involved. So UCB, we should never have privatized it. In fact, there was an attempt to even privatizing UDB. You know, I think it's the president who actually finally said, not on this one. But most of those entities went, including UEB, you know, and most of the key strategic government parastatals we should have kept, we sold them.
Okay.
Although by liberalizing the market and then privatizing, how do I call it? It powered up private enterprise. And that's why people started investing in the economy. The private sector actually became very buoyant, okay, which has actually brought us where we are today.
Yeah, take of Ramadan on that kind of history, where we came from, where we are now, in some summary.
Yes, for me I can summarize
and also what you think. Like you said, in hindsight, I like the argument you used to make. You used to sit here, and I like the analogy of saying, when the Bretton Woods convinced us to go for reforms, and they talked about privatization, that some of us thought that when they say open the door, for us we just decided to remove the doors and throw away. You remember that analogy? Yes. I like it so much. So in your summary, you can make your summary of what you think, and also then what you think, maybe in hindsight, are there reforms that you think can make our economy more buoyant?
Okay. Of course, Ugandan economy does not begin with the independence. It begins with the dawn of colonization, about 1900. That's when the modern economy of Uganda is born. Of course, an enclave economy, very small economy, managed by the Europeans and the Asians in the sea of our peasantry. And the key events which happened then was, number one, the introduction of the so-called cash crops. The cotton brought here, the Robusta coffee we had, but we didn't have Arabica coffee, brought from Malawi and Ethiopia, tea, sugar, rubber, and so on. And then the extension of what popularly was called Uganda Railway. That building of the railway, for the first time, the agricultural products, those ones I've mentioned, when the railway reached Kisumu, and then in 1901 and came and connected with us, we could now afford to take these products to the Mombasa port. And the cost of transporting them now was relatively lower than the value of the products. That started the export trade for Uganda. And then the third key event is the electricity. When finally these colonialists bring us electricity. That first company which came and was selling some bulbs and so on. And eventually the Worthington plan of 1946, building for us the Owen Falls Dam, because the one which planned for it, and also bringing UEB to get the electricity around, and so on and so forth. So I don't want, but that history, we shouldn't lose it, because you need to understand that Uganda started as a very small economy around that enclave, which the president usually loves to talk about. But then when we come to independence time, 1962, by 61 there, the World Bank actually sent here a mission, which mission concluded that the only sector where we could break even, where we could have a comparative advantage, was peasant agriculture. That's why they condemned us. And we continued with that mistake. Remember, already they had created UDC for us in 1952. It had started creating some base of industry, but we didn't industrialize the country. We went into even Obote ones, which is talking about the first plan he had, 1961, 62 to 66, was on agriculture. It didn't think about industry. It's after 66 that industry is thought about. Then some growth was really achieved in the first decade of independence. Some tangible growth. They call them the golden days of Uganda in terms of dynamism of getting this small economy grow. Remember, the GDP was less than $500,000. Rather, $1 billion. It was about $449 million. That was the GDP of Uganda at independence. $449 million. You know, now it is one company which has that net worth. So it was a very small economy, but also the population was small, about 7.2 million. Then that small economy grew, but one nurtured it through agriculture especially, and agro-processing, and some industry after 66. 71, as he has told you, when Amin came, he destroyed this economy through bad policy, populist policy. And by the time he left in 79, I don't want to waste a lot of time there in the 70s, because there is no economy to discuss. It's all problems we had about. By 79, inflation was 214%. This thing we have been discussing here. When we hear those numbers, some of us, we don't really, 214, okay. Life was tough, my dear. The entire country was full of shortages. You know, inflation comes with one thing, shortage. And with those shortages, I mean, it brought more distortions. Price controls, foreign exchange control, also printing money, as he has been saying, and so on and so forth.
Accessing goods.
So as a result, we had those challenges of smuggling, the hoarding, black markets, and they continued through that cocktail of governments which came between 1980 up to 86. In 1986, there was no economy. GDP was 0.3% growth, 0.3 itself subsistence. That enclave had been decimated. In other words, then the economic recovery program comes in of 87, supported by IMF and World Bank.
Yeah.
And that's what Umara was talking about. Now, with that, much as liberalization was key and privatization, Charles, the fundamental reform which was done by the current government and the current leader was to get the private sector in the driving seat of the economic recovery and economic management. Private sector is what eluded most leaders in the past, thinking that they could use interventionist policies to manage the economy. With the private sector left to play the leading role, as they say, the rest is history. We have had minimum recovery by 1999 and gone into the period of sustained growth of above 6%. Now we have unfinished business. And this is what I want to conclude with. And the unfinished business is about having the economy working for a few people, especially here in Greater Kampala. It's where the economy is. Having this economy which is fast growing, because now the GDP has grown to $45 billion from about $4 billion in 1986. That is 11 times growth. about 100 times growth from the economy we had in independence in terms of the multiplication. In other words, Ugandan economy has never been bigger, has never been full of opportunities, and even healthier than it is today. But it is working for a few people. The masses are in subsistence agriculture. So that's the main unfinished business. That's why that PDM is so critical, to ensure that we get to kickstart the growth of those other people who have been left out. Then we have the cost of doing business also, electricity price and reliability, the cost of money, and the cost of transport and logistics, plus technology. This is what government is concentrating on to deal with. And definitely not forgetting all other fray of things, the unemployment and underemployment, the corruption, the pet subject of my friend Sarah, and all of these issues which we must deal with. It's unfinished business, and for us to deal with it, we need to have a change of the way we do things. If it is about, for example, corruption, let us reduce access of human interaction with the money. Like now we are going to send the parish development money next week direct to the recipient.
Because very many cows are being arrested for
no more middlemen of money. From the treasury to the bank account of the circle, and to be dealt with by the owners of the circle, not even the parish chief.
Okay.
To get near this man.
Correct. Thank you very much.
Just 1.5 minutes.
I'm giving only 1 minute to both of you. I mean to each of you.
Hopefully 1.5 minutes.
Please.
Hopefully.
Just straightforward. Go for it. I think the ECOP discussion, we will have it on its own.
Yes, exactly.
We will have to have that debate on the European Union Commission resolution of its own.
Thank you. Just from what the two have said, it's clear that for the last 60 years or so, every point in time, the economy would be determined by a number of factors, either political instability, civil war, or fluctuating, global commodity prices, or even economic reforms and all that. So obviously there's been good progress, impressive progress. And just like Honorable Paul was trying to cite, when you look at the inflation of 1987, actually 1987 inflation rate was at 190%. But when you come down to 1991, it went down to about 26%. And so there's been progress. But I think there is need to look at some of the areas where we still have weaknesses to this day. And I think we need to do a lot more in dealing with the weaknesses in the manufacturing sector. We need to do more in that area. We also need to look at how we deal with the constraint on small scale and medium enterprises. And of course, we need to, just as Doctor put it, when you look at the picture being given, the beautiful picture being given, it's very much to do with the economy of Kampala and surrounding areas. And then when you go far deep, then you get a different story on the lives of the citizens there, where some parts of the country are still considered doing extremely badly. And so the question is, how do we then begin to create an economy where every part of the country takes part in contributing to the economy, but also feels a part of the economy? Looking at Busoga sub-region, looking at Bugiso, looking at Acholi, be it Karamoja, how do they become part of this when their stories are completely different, as if they're not part of, So we need to put focus, And it has a lot to do with how we scale up the level of production and productivity as we deal with the two sectors I just mentioned. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Finally, Sarah.
I think my last comment will be on basically when you look at the composition of our economy, right from the pre-colonial era, where the predominant economic activity was agriculture. As much as today agriculture contributes about 24% of GDP, we have the majority population still stuck in the agricultural sector. So nothing much has changed when it comes to the predominant economic activity in this country. I know that NIM introduced the diversification of the economy with industries and services emerging, and they now take about 55% of GDP. But why is it that majority people are still dependent on agriculture? Of course, there could be advantages. Each time our economy has gone through the free fall out of the political challenges, still agriculture has proven to be resilient and has provided food on the table for citizens, including the times of COVID lockdown. But why is it that we cannot employ majority people in other parts of the diversified economy and they're still stuck in agriculture?
Okay, like that question to end it all. And thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much, Ladit Mapenduzi Martin Ojara.
A gentleman was, you said we are talking about the EU debate next time. A gentleman asked me a very interesting question yesterday.
Yeah.
That does it mean, and he gave a very interesting example that looks like the neighbors are beginning to even determine what you have to cook in your house. So the neighbors will tell you that we have a problem with meat. So tomorrow you have to cook
is different, you know. One of the solutions, in my view, first of all, I hate that someone thinks that they should manage us, but I think the solution starts with
But why are you going there?
Mr.
You are the one inviting them.
The moment they get us to support our economy 100%, then we shall tell these people that please, you're not supposed to determine what we should do.
No, but I think, Charles, you cannot have your cake, eat it, and expect to lose weight at the same time. What are you looking for in the EU as regards your oil? And you don't want them to say anything.
That's a very big elephant in the room.
And you don't want them to say anything.
We are going to be discussing.
What are you looking for?
As a banker, I will tell you the implications.
Yes.
What are you looking for?
Of that
resolution.
The resolution with the EU. And nobody in this country should take it lightly. It's a big issue.
What are you looking for?
As a banker, now you mean that the banks are going to fear?
If you don't want your neighbors,
regulation,
don't go to them.
Regulations in those countries are very, very strong, and institutions listen. If France tomorrow tells Total, quit, or we will apply, penalties and all that, because they're saying now you have to respect the Paris Agreement and all that on climate change, and you are there promoting fossil fuel, we would be Total will walk.
Okay.
We will have a debate.
We are going to have a debate.
We should have extracted this oil 10 years ago.
We are going to have a debate on that, but I want to thank you so much, Honorable Mara, for finding time to come. Thank you very much, PSST. Someone said you are an OB here. So, for Behind the Headlines, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
always a pleasure.
For always finding time. You're a very busy person. Of course, all of you are very busy people, and that you find time to come and share your knowledge and views with the people. I don't take it for granted. We really, really appreciate as UBC as well. And on that note, I liked two comments very fast. The comment of Michael from Kaveramaido. Michael says, Charles, I like Gobi and Omara, but please let them have respect for each other's views. Gobi should not provoke
Omara
Since
should
we want solutions, Omara should also listen to Gobi. I would love to see their debate with solutions, but they should not show off. The debate is okay, and non-economists like us are wondering where the country will be going. Let Honorable Omara and Dr. Gobi prescribe the treatment, while Honorable Ojara and Sarah should keep on telling the pains of their people, the local people. But anyway, I like how Dr. Gobi toned down finally.
you need that, please go.
It is Tukonga. And then finally, Captain Gad Gasatura, a senior citizen, he was an MP and all that, a senior pilot. I really likes debate a lot. So he says, he follows this debate a lot. He says, Charles, you have done a great job. Honorable Omara and Honorable Mapenduzi have proven their worth. Dr. Gobi is always a great teacher. Dr. Sarah is always a great listener and questioner, allowing experts time to do justice to the topic. We have all been winners. Thank you all. Thank you very much, Honorable Gasatura, and all of you for listening. And thank you, Uganda. We will be making follow-ups, of course, and endeavor to always bring you the best that we can. And we are continuing with the different discussions, but maybe in the next, maybe next week or the week after, we need to bring the health sector to try and discuss the new challenge of Ebola. Yes, Mubende is now the one being talked about, but you never know. We move a lot, and the world is a small place. Within a day, someone from Mubende could be in another place. And yes, of course, the problem in Mubende is also the problem for all of Uganda. So be careful and take care. Ebola is now with us, and it's a dangerous disease. So we need to take care and follow the sensitization that Ministry of Health is trying to bring. We will endeavor to get them from Ministry of Health and then share with you in the subsequent programs that we do. Otherwise, thank you all very much. God bless you, and bye-bye.